Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of the City Council.
Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Council of the City of Long Beach held Wednesday, May 1st, 2019 at 7 p.m. We'll have a roll call. Councilmember Menta.
Present.
Councilmember Mandel.
Present.
Councilmember Moore.
Present.
Vice President Simon.
Here.
President Aramo. Let the record indicate the presence of acting city manager Robert Agostisi and assistant corporation counsel Greg Kalinsky. We will now have to salute to the flag.
Councilwoman Moore, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that is a public hearing.
Item number 1, public hearing, bond ordinance authorizing financing for the cost of fiscal year 2018-2019 separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city upon separation from employment, stating an estimated total cost thereof is $400,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $400,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation.
All right, so every year in recent memory, the city has borrowed to cover separation pay costs. This year is no different. Specifically, the city designates these loan proceeds as revenue in the budget every year. That's why our failure to borrow can result in a cash shortfall. And that's exactly what was cited by Moody's last year and a major contributing cause to our account. Tonight we're here, however, for a very narrow and limited purpose. In July 2018, the city authorized $1.8 million in separation pay borrowing, $1.3 million of which was previously encumbered. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the city knew going into this year that it owed $1.3 million of installment payments to retirees who had previously retired. The remaining $500,000 is what the council afforded the acting city manager to pay all separation costs that would arise during this fiscal year. The reason we're here today, simply stated, is because more employees left than anticipated during the fiscal year, specifically in the police department, and those employees were delineated in the legislative memo. Those are the ones who put us over the top, so to speak. And as I mentioned, they are listed there. They're itemized in the legislative memo.
Okay. I would just ask Christy Hightower, our comptroller consultant, is that correct? To just discuss how we got here, and there was more allocated in the original budget. I think it's $2.2 million in the original budget.
I believe the original budget was about 1.5, 1.6 in general fund, the 200,000 or 300,000 in sewer. That was actually what was in the budget. So that was covered by the 1.8 million that was initially authorized back in July.
But the recommendation was originally more.
The recommendation was more, just because there are sometimes years where more people retire than we expect. We always include a little bit of extra in the budget because there always are retirements throughout the year. The city has a very large full-time workforce. And the thing that nobody's going to retire between July and April just really doesn't make sense. So we always include some cushion, and then that way, in the end, the city can only borrow what it actually spends on separation payout. So whether you authorize, 2.5 million for 10 million, if you only spend 2 million on separation pays, you can only borrow 2 million on separation pays. That is regulated by New York State law, and bond council makes sure that that's exactly what the city does, as well as the city itself making sure. So when we had asked for the initial 2.5 million back in July, that was just to make sure that at this point in the year, if we did go over what we had initially projected, we wouldn't have to come back to you and have another public hearing for the same exact situation.
So we're, to be clear, we're only authorizing the amount. So if we authorize, like you said in the example, $10 million, but we needed $2 million. In the next year, is that $8 million available to borrow, or would be a new year of borrowing?
No, it is available to borrow up for up to 10 years, but again, only to the extent that you have actual separation.
Actual separation, okay. Okay, and what would be the ramifications if we don't borrow this additional $400,000 of obligation?
So there'll be a few. The first and foremost is that this $400,000 will most likely have to be paid out based on contractual obligations. So you will have a deficit in the fund for the amount that you don't borrow. That's one. We did already project a small deficit for fiscal year 19, and we did portray that to Moody's when they rated the city back in February. When they did rate the city, they downgraded the city, and also applied a negative outlook, which means that they're watching for possible future downgrades. In every rating, Moody's will always give a few bullet points of what can make the rating go up and what can make the rating go down. They do that to give a municipality almost like a roadmap. Say, okay, if you want a ratings increase, this is what you need to show us. And if you don't want a decrease, don't do these things. So specifically in what can make the rating go down, they actually said if the fiscal year 2019 deficit is worse than projected. Not authorizing this tonight will make that deficit worse than projected by the $400,000 because it is needed to cover it. And the other piece of it is that from March to June, until we start getting beach fees, until we get our state aid, this is a very tight cash time for the city. It's kind of like, all the taxes have been collected, we're kind of using up what we've collected throughout the year, and we don't have until July, August when taxes come back in, but at the same time, you're ramping up all your activity to get ready for Memorial Day, get ready to open the beach, get ready to start some programs, so cash can get a little strained at this time of year. So also by not being able to borrow this additional money, that will just put further constraints on cash.
Any other questions from the council for Christie Hightower?
I have a quick one. How are these numbers calculated and then verified?
So bi-weekly, employees are required to give in their time. Departments then summarize that time and submit it to payroll. For most departments, for CSEA, fire, and exempt, I should say, that time is counted in units, and as people earn time and take time, bi-weekly it's adjusted. So when they retire, once they get their final paycheck, those banks, those accrual banks, or earning what they've used throughout their time here, is then pulled out of units, and then that's what's used to calculate the payouts based on what they're allowed to be paid out. That is then put into a voucher, either by Tommy for CSEA, fire, and admin, or by the police department for cops. And that voucher comes up through the controller's office, and it's reviewed by the acting controller. It's also, while you don't have a full-time controller, I also review them for mathematical accuracy. And then they go to city manager's office for final review.
Can you just explain what Munis is?
Munis is the accounting software that the system uses. So payroll is done in-house. We don't use ADP or paychecks or anything like that. So all of the payroll is done within Munis. So it also keeps track of what total account, which is vacation, sick, comp, personnel, and also any type of terminal or lag fee. There was points in the city's past where certain unions gave up time a little bit bi-weekly, and then they would get paid at separation, so that's considered their last pay after this fall here, so unions also track that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Christie Hightower?
The total payback amount stays with what we thought was previously about $480,000, correct?
You mean the total debt service on
The total debt
$100,000?
services. That was the number we used previously.
My estimations is the highest debt service on the extra $400,000 will be about $87,000 a year for 5 years. So that's just under $450 that you would get back.
Oh, okay. And is that built into the 2019-2020 budget at that service?
No, because that debt service doesn't come on until 2021. So because it's borrowed so late in the year, the only thing you'll pay next year is interest and then your difference will the year after. So just be a small amount of interest in next year, and then yes, that we do allow for some cushion in band debt, band interest in the budget, based on what we expect to borrow.
Okay. Are any of the funds going to be used to reimburse the city for payments that were already made?
Yes, and that's why we're here at this time, because the 1.8 million that was authorized back in July has covered all payments up until now. The city is getting ready to make another payment, I believe at the end of this week, and that would put you over the 1.8 million. So that we're making sure that you can make the payments as long as the bond is authorized, not necessarily borrowed, it has to be authorized. So if by authorizing it tonight, then the city is able to make those payments coming up on the next cycle, because they're made bi-weekly.
Okay, so, because section 4 just says after the effective date, so as long as it's passed,
Yes,
payments
because,
can be made.
yes, because today would be the effective date.
Okay. On one of the receiving claims reports for the officers, the former acting city manager signed as the comptroller as well as the city manager. Is that legal and in accordance with established procedures?
I mean, I can tell you that that is a practice that has been utilized for as long as I've been here in situations where the other officer of the city is absent, the city manager will typically step in and sign for that officer.
So it's appropriate?
I don't think, let's put it this way, there is nothing that I'm aware of in the charter or elsewhere which would prohibit that.
Okay, so we can have the same person sign for all the lines? I guess what I'm trying to establish is, did we remove a check from the process?
I don't think a check was necessarily removed. I'm sure that the controller was intricately involved in the payment calculations. However, on the day that the voucher was generated, chances are that the controller simply, or acting controller simply wasn't here.
Okay, and I guess, just one final question, can you talk about the formula that's used to calculate the payouts?
That would be based on the individual, depending on where they retire from, whether they're an admin or CCA, based on whatever's approved at the manager level, is what then comes to payroll to be verified.
Right, so in case these 4 officers, what formula was used?
I guess I will ask Police Commissioner Tackey to come up and talk about specifically calculations that are done within the police department.
Good evening. The police department has a system called Q&A, which is a records management system for time. We have a lot of clauses in our contract as to how time can be accumulated, and every October, each officer gets a time statement. That's carefully checked. That's at the point where they can appeal an entry that either was incorrect or gave them too much or too little. I've never seen too much, but I have seen too little. And then we calculate against two calculations against their rate of pay. We have what's called 232 time and 261 time. Based on arbitration award in 1994, any time approved before 1994 is at 261. Your rate of pay divided by 261 and 4 times 261, and then the after 1994 it's a 232 rate. So it's a little more profitable. And then that's sent to the controller for a double check, along with all of the reports from the Q&A system. We have all the entries. It's about, each officer is about 60 pages.
Okay. And could you explain, it was explained to us that officers will often take comp time in lieu of overtime to, I mean, is that?
That's a very common practice, especially among the young officers, because it's not really impactful on their paycheck, because they're below rate of pay. And then they do that. There's also automatic comp time approved. If an officer works 12 hours, he automatically gets an hour on the post per year.
And does that save the city money in the short term?
Yes, yes, it does. We do average, it would probably increase my overtime budget by a couple $100,000 if they didn't take time.
Annually?
Annually.
And who does the initial calculations?
Well, the officer submits slips. The slips are then reviewed by the commanding officer, and then they're entered into the system by a timekeeper.
Who's the commanding officer?
It was Lieutenant Mark Stark, now it's Lieutenant Richard DePalma.
And all these calculations then go to your desk?
I get a report every pay period.
But for the earned obligation that they get, the final payment whenever time?
Yes, I sign off on that.
You signed up, and who gives it to you, calculated and ready to go here?
Lieutenant Dodge.
Lieutenant Dodge.
He was the inventor of the system.
Okay. Does anybody else here have any questions for Commissioner Tagny on police
So,
calculations?
you're saying it saves 200,000 doing it that way?
That's a guesstimate.
I get that, but what it's really doing, it's deferring it to later and making it a later council's issue that they have to pay back. And the money is still being paid, and probably at a higher
The debt is
rate some
accrued.
years later, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the payouts being made, are the formulas in accordance with the PDA contract?
They are in accordance with the PBA contract except for vacation time, which is above that number in the contract, but that's been a practice that we operate under for the 41 years I've been here.
Okay. Is there anything in writing that documents that?
No, the only thing that you could do is look at all the payouts going back. I don't know, I don't know what it was before I got here, but if you go back 41 years I was here, you'll see that there were times, when I first got hired, we were short-staffed. I was not taking vacation for the first 2 years. So that went to a separate bank of time bank approved.
So if it's.
And at 20 days a year, it puts me right over.
So if it's not in the payouts, and not in accordance with vacation payouts, not in accordance with the contract, is there a cap? Is there no?
There's no cap.
Okay. Could you explain past practice a little bit?
Sure.
You know, I understand what that means.
Yeah, and without necessarily taking a position on whether a past practice exists, because it's corporation counsel, it might be unethical or certainly not advisable for me to do so. This concept of past practice exists under the Taylor law, and I'm just going to read off the criteria for evaluating whether there's a binding past practice that you have to adhere to. The test for establishing a binding past practice under the Taylor law was set out in its decision in Matter County of Nassau, where it ruled that the practice was unequivocal and was continued uninterrupted for a period of time sufficient under the circumstances to create a reasonable expectation among the affected bargaining unit employees that the practice would continue. And Herb also noted that the expectation of continuation of the practice is something that may be presumed from its duration with consideration of the specific circumstances under which the practice has existed. And if I'm understanding Commissioner Academy correctly, this practice has existed for all of your 41 years of employment, correct?
Yes, and as an ex-PBA president, I know I'm doing this.
Right, and again, without me taking a position, is it reasonable for current officers to assume, based on prior practices, that this practice would exist at the time of their separation?
Absolutely.
Just so everybody's on the same page, can you explain what PERB is?
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Probably should have said that at the outset. Public Employment Relations Board.
What is it?
They have jurisdiction, basically over all traditional labor matters. What I mean by that is the relationship between unions and management or labor relations, public sector, in the public sector.
So it's like the courts of labor relations.
Correct.
Is there any other questions for Commissioner Tagny?
I do want to say one last thing though. If it is a binding past practice, the city is sharply curtailed in the manners in which it can address that particular practice. There's really only two known ways to do it. One is through interest arbitration, and the other is to negotiate a different practice with the police officers unions. So I can tell you that one of the things that is one of the items on the city's punch list in this interest arbitration that's now pending is relates to separation pay. And so it is something that the city has pursued. We're waiting for a reward from the arbitrator right now on that. And if it is a binding past practice, that means it's a mandatory subject of negotiation with the police officers union insofar as it relates to the term and condition of employment, as anything related to compensation does.
And also in the last arbitration award, there was a cap placed on the wires.
Okay. Anything else for Commissioner Tagny? No. Okay, seeing that the calculations were done by Lieutenant Dodge and he's here, if you wouldn't mind coming up. If you could just speak to your experience doing the calculations for your men, and touch on past practice of how it's been done in terms of relating the cap that's in the contract to actual practice.
Well, to give you the overview, the system works very much like a checkbook downstairs in the police department. Every hour that an officer accumulates goes in as an entry, a slip with a reason why it was earned, under what circumstances it was earned, and every hour that an officer uses is listed with a reason for why it was used. Commissioner Taglia alluded to the October time statement. Once a year, we provide the entire aggregate of that time for an officer back to the officer, take it out of the building, make it a permanent record that can be reviewed. With respect to the vacations and things like that, one thing that he didn't touch on was that sometimes officers aren't afforded the ability to take a vacation because it would incur overtime someplace else. So while that accrual may go up, the alternative is to put the officer on vacation and bring another officer on overtime to fill the spot. So they make management decisions with that respect to which way it works better. Injuries also, when officers get injured, if they have a vacation schedule, a line of duty injury that occurs here at work, they can't take that vacation, so the vacation moves back into their bank. Again, it's not always practical for them to take that vacation at a later time because it will incur additional overtime. With respect to the calculation when they retire, there are 4 or 5 categories of time in the police department. And each of those categories has a 232 rate and a 261 rate, as Commissioner Taglia alluded to, depending on when the time was earned. When an officer retires, we generate a report of how much of each of those categories of time they have. We place it onto the report. We take their hourly rate for the 232 and the 261 time and run it out as a line to show how much of that category of time incurs. We then, when the report is completed, we provide that report, that finished summary, and all the backup documentation, every single hour when it was earned and when it was used across the office year. We provide that first to the police commissioner, who does his initial review. We then provide it to the payroll clerk, who does a second review, Mr. Larson. And then it moves on from there to the controller's office, where it takes another review. The numbers are repeatable. You can work the numbers over and over, and they come out exactly the same every single time. It's a very unique system that we have as far as the accountability in the police department. Have I left anything out that you did? If you wouldn't mind, we know who you are, but just introduce who you are with the department.
I am the commanding officer of TARU, the Technical Assistance Response Unit. I do mostly electronics, but I wrote the software that we used back in 1993. We've been using the same software ever since. It works well for the way that we function. It allows a lot of reports to be generated, a lot of accuracy.
I was gonna ask, you beat me to it, how long have you been charged with being the person in the police department to calculate these payments?
Well, again, I wrote the software in 1993, so I was involved in the process of the contract from, the software was finished in 93, I started in maybe 91 or 92. And when my boss had left about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I took over the full-time duties of chief. Before that, I was assisting him or doing the review of that.
Thank you.
And I just have a question. Is there a reasonable expectation in the force that there's no cap on vacation time?
Yeah, it's always been that. I'm here 34 years. It's always been, again, because of that, Commissioner alluded to vacations you couldn't take because you got to be happy you couldn't take it.
Right.
You were injured, the needs of the department, things just come up and it runs out.
Vacations get denied. In other words, it's for management too. You put in for vacation, so sorry, you can take that week.
You pick vacations at the beginning of the year, but if you're injured or something comes up, schools, department emergencies, you may be asked to forego that vacation.
Gotcha.
About approximately, Lieutenant Dash, how many separation payments have you calculated during the span of your career?
Maybe, I'd be guessing, probably 30, 40, maybe more.
Okay. And during that time, the practice you described of there being no cap on vacation time, that's something that's open and known to both the union and management.
That is correct.
And the reason being what you described before with respect to overtime avoidance.
Yes, that's correct.
Are there any other questions from the council?
Just what, so I assume that this practice is applied uniformly to all the officers then, correct?
It is.
Okay, it looks like, just, based on just the sport, is that sick time adheres, the payout adheres to the PBA contract, but the vacation seems to be the exception.
Sick time is a unique category of time specifically calculated in a different way. Officers are paid with sick time, with respect to sick time, they're paid for half of up to 3,200 hours of sick time. It's a different calculation than the way everything else is calculated. It's a unique category of time.
So is the vacation time the only time that varies from what's in the PBA contract?
What's in the PBA contract, I think so. I think that would be fair, but sick time is not the same kind of time as vacation time. Because sick time isn't something that officers can elect to just take a day off. Sick time is, they're essentially under house arrest when they use sick time. They can't leave the house, they enjoy the same rights they do with any other category of time.
But regarding, caps and payout rates and percentages that are allowed, is vacation time the only one that deviates?
Pretty much, yes, because it's unique in the way that it's used, where you block these vacations and might take them.
Any other questions from the council? No? Thank you very much, Lieutenant Judge. Appreciate your time. Anything else from the council? Okay, anyone from the public care to speak on this item? Mr. Lozevich?
My question is,
Name and address.
Maribel Savage, Long Beach.
Thank you.
My question is, number one, do we have a policy set up that is use it or lose it, where you can only carry over so much? Do we have anything like that, like the county has? My second question is, just because things were done a certain way, times have changed, obviously we're in dire need, and maybe it's time we look at changing some of these things that, oh, that's how it's always been done, to what you need to do today to get us out of a very big hole.
Well, it would seem that based on what Lieutenant Dodge said, at least for police officers, there is no use it or lose it for vacation time. They seem to accrue it based on the reasons that Lieutenant Dodge said, that it saves overtime under certain circumstances, or officers may not be available to cover certain shifts and are unable to use their vacation. As far as changing some of these things, I believe the city has raised this point during the PBA voluntary interest arbitration. We're hopeful that the arbitrator will take what we said under account and impose more stringent limits on the PBA going forward. As far as the CSEA and the fire department, I'm not familiar with the fire department contract. I know that the CSEA is capped at 80 days vacation. I believe exempts can accrue, can carry over up to 50 days and can accrue up to 25 over a given year for a total of 75. But that's about it.
Just to let you know, Mr. Kalinsky, I'm not asking just about the PBA, I'm talking about across the board, okay?
I think I covered it.
No, you did, but I just don't want anyone walking away saying, she's picking on PBA.
No, of course.
I'm talking straight across the board, and just because things are, doesn't make it right.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Ms. Hession?
I can still come back on the second thing, right?
There's only one item, right?
No, there's two. I just have one comment about this.
Yes, yes.
My question is, the police, it took 3 people to explain how they, figure out their days and their times and money and what the ultimate payout will be. And I'm wondering if you have that detailed thing for everybody who works in City Hall. I heard what you just said, Mr. Kaminsky, about hours and so forth, but I mean, do people sign in, do they fill out a piece of paper, as Lieutenant just said, and also Mr. Taggett just said?
Sure, Ms. Hightower, can you speak to the calculations of the entire workforce?
So as far as tracking, people, talking about tracking time, well, as far as people working day to day, yes, there should, there's time, there's sign-in sheets. It is manual at this point, there are no time clocks or anything like that, to me, but they are manual, and the department head is required to summarize them in a time sheet for the entire department, and to sign off on that and send it to payroll prior to. That time sheet will encompass days used. Days earned is automatic in the payroll system based on what bargaining unit they're in, as far as what they earn.
So everyone who comes to work signs in and signs out.
They're supposed to be.
Do you think they do? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side here? Mr. Guslo? Name and address, please.
Yep, Jay Russell, Long Beach. Bear with me, I'm scribbling away furiously. Start out with simple stuff. Do I have 3 minutes uninterrupted, or is there gonna be give and take here? Okay. Been enjoying forever. The employees are entitled to these payments, no doubt. They're contractually, city's contractually obligated. Doesn't the city have the ability to push out these payments for as long as 5 years? And if so, what's the hurry here? Has the city voluntarily entered into any agreement with these employees that would compel the city to bond these payments and make them now? The other thing is that, based on the explanation I've heard here tonight, that this is largely driven by accrued vacation time, which has been explained is accrued pursuant to a past practice, a long-running past practice. And if I understood Mr. Agostini, he said that the past practice has effectively hardened into a condition of employment that is equal strength to the contractual entitlement. However, the problem with past practice is that we know from other payouts that were made is that it has not been applied uniformly. We know that other payouts have been made, such as the payouts to Mr. Agostini, that have been attributed to past practice, but that the practice has been wildly inconsistently applied among similarly situated individuals. So how can we have a situation like this where we're just making tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of payments, where there's nothing written down that gives us guideposts to what those payments need to be? Instead, we're at the mercy of some vague notion of past practice and somebody's interpretation of that practice. And also, the city has in the past, I'm aware, entered into negotiations with employees over separation pay, and sometimes for greater amounts than they're owed under the CBA. I need to know if that's happening here. Also, are these payments that are reflected in these 4 individuals the total payments for them, or are they just this budget year's installments?
Okay. I would ask Christy Hightower, the ability to push these out for 5 years, is that already happening? These are already,
You can spread them over 5 years potentially, with the employee's consent. You can't simply just push them out for 5 years. That's not how these contracts work. The obligation arises in most cases immediately upon separation.
and that relates to the last question, is where this is only for this year's payment.
That part's correct, yes, this is, we're talking about, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, some of them, yes. Some of them are just this year's payments, and some of them are.
I'm sorry, say that again, some of them are.
Yeah.
Some people listed are just this year's payment, and some of them are everything that will happen.
Because they opted to, it's the employee's choice whether they get it in installments or they get it as a lump sum.
Depending on the bargaining unit. I believe, police, the city had its option to pay out over 3 years, up to 5 years with the employee.
That's the police, is the
Yes.
city can opt for 3 years, but with the employee's consent up to 5 years.
Right,
Not
CCA,
COLA, just to clarify. No.
Just the
CCA,
No,
how,
it's under the expired CPA contract, just to clarify.
That's the Commanding Officers Association for everyone.
as far as the CACA goes, outside of a specific agreement or incentive, it's student loan fund.
Okay.
You can't do an agreement for something different, but it is student loan fund.
And voluntary, Mr. Russell asked about voluntary agreements. Is there any sort of,
That
sort
would be
of,
less than
these are all contractual, correct?
The agreements that we're talking about here tonight these are contractual, correct? Or rising under the first offer.
I think the vague notion of past practice, to quote you, Mr. Gusto, I think was pretty much answered by Lieutenant Dodge's description that it's not a vague notion, it's pretty much a policy. Okay, I'll continue with this side, I'm sorry, Ms. Egan. Name and address for the record.
Nora Egan. So I just have a few questions about this. So the total number we're borrowing tonight is for 400,000 for these four gentlemen, but the total that we owe them is close to 1.7. Why is the public not made aware? It's not 1.7?
Well, the site averages, but I think they're over that 530. So
Each, when you add the four of this together,
Collectively over the course of the
four
of the
people,
years.
four gentlemen, the four police officers that were named, when you add all their payouts together, it adds up to
That
just
I
1.6.
that I wouldn't be privy to in terms of possible that.
You're not privy to it?
That's why I said it's all at this moment now.
I think the residents should know how much we owe them in total. It would be like good, I'm not saying that they're not deserving of it, but we should know. And then I don't understand why we don't have a payment plan made out for them. One gentleman who's the detective has a payment plan made out, so we owe him X amount in January 19, January 20, January 21, January 22. Why can't it not all be listed that you owe me money, you're gonna pay me on X amount today, so we can budget exactly what they are owed.
I think we just
Yeah,
answered that.
the legislative memo and the resolution says this fiscal year, they're owed almost $340,000, like $26 less.
Right,
But that's what they're owed between now and June 30.
right, but for every single person, I looked over, like, nearly over 200 payout sheets for employees since 2012, and there is not a breakdown for every single one of them of when such and such is owed a lump sum or when they're owed X, Y, and Z. And the calculations need to be determined correctly. And I don't think you should approve this bond because we don't know the calculation method.
Ms. Egan, I'm sorry. Joe. Oh, my bad. I was going to say that some of the concerns that you raised are being addressed in the second resolution tonight.
I'm sorry, what?
Some of the concerns that you raised are being addressed in the second resolution on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
You'll be able to raise them during the next section.
Oh, if I can back up?
Yeah.
The next
Okay.
section.
And I would say that we did budget for them. In last year's budget, the recommended amount was to borrow to 2.5 million. We ended up with 1.8 million. 1.3 of that was, we already knew was going out the door. So there's usually a little cushion built into the
Right.
requirements that we didn't know. So we did budget for it. We just came up a little short. Actually, the comptroller's recommendation was fairly right on, but the council chose to authorize less, so that's why we're here now.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Jim. Mr. Herman, sorry about that. Name and address for the record?
James Kirkland, Long Beach, New York. And under the legislative memo, the one thing that jumps out at me is the term unanticipated. It seems like that's what's causing a lot of the trouble here because you can't budget for something you don't know about before it happens. So is there any regulation or requirement that you be notified long in advance when somebody's planning on retiring so that you can plan for it? Maybe, setting a date, maybe the end of the current fiscal year, I gotta know what's going on next
We wish, unfortunately, no, we just experienced this exact issue this week, actually, with the retirement of the fire department that caught us off guard. There's no advance requirement for the employer.
So can you put one in, I mean, or is it not allowed?
You can try to negotiate that with the union, sure, but that'd be mandatory subject to negotiation.
Okay, but that could be applied across the board, like for the entire administration, or just certain departments?
Well, you have to pick off one union at
Ah, it's a union thing. Okay.
But that's why the comptroller does recommend that cushion, when we do our budgeting at the beginning of the year. Because we know like I said, we knew 1.3 million was already anticipated and already encumbered.
Right.
The recommendation was for 2.5, we authorized 1.8, and we ended up at about 2.2. So the calculation was pretty close, the recommended, beginning of the fiscal year.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine over a period of time, you could come up with an average of what nobody's
Right.
getting, put that in. So, all right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colonel. Yes, Ms. Ford, legislative board. Name and address for the record. Good evening.
Ms. Ford of Long Beach. John, I want to thank you very much for your comments and looking out at the payoff sheets, like the same signature, the city manager, the controller. So I think it's important checks and balances, and I understand when you talk about like, it may be okay for that person to do it. Sometimes we don't always do the right thing. And in fact, that in the charter, the treasurer of the city is normally supposed to be the tax collector, but a couple of years ago, the city manager at that time changed that and removed the tax collector from being the treasurer to one of his political appointees. So, for me, I always think that there's some things that are written into law that should be followed, and that's something that maybe we should look at when the person should be able to sign two separate lines. You should have all three people, three different lines, taking a look at what we're paying out. When you talk about the timesheets, and I fully support, our union members, it is in their contract, they are waiting for this money and they're entitled to it. When we talk about, talked about with the timesheets that people sign, is this something that all the exempt employees do as well? Every single person, I know maybe the city manager may be exempt, but everyone else, I'm going to assume, should be signing timesheets. Do they sign in and out each and every single day and record their hours?
They do record their hours, I know when I was a comptroller, I absolutely have a time sheet that I submit by weekend.
And they're all followable, right? The timesheets?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And then, just going back to what Mr. Kirkland had talked about, and I understand, we cannot mandate when somebody's going to retire or not. And everybody gets surprised when somebody decides, I got the time, I'm leaving. But I think that probably, for the benefit of all of us here in the city, that maybe we can take a look at the past practices. You have a history of people retiring every year. Maybe to take a look at the average of what is spent in regard to how many employees, how many police officers, firemen, CSEA people who leave. And then maybe take a look that maybe it's going to be $1 million every year. And rather than always having to bond $1 million and hope that you cover for those people, that maybe you start putting that into the budget, okay? So that we're not paying interest on people who are leaving the employment here. And, I think that it might be something where we won't be hit with such surprises and we don't have to have meetings like this at like an odd hour and an odd day to come up with goals and 400,000. If we don't pass it, we're not going to balance that budget. So I would strongly recommend that you take a look at that and see what historically we have in payment in finance. I'm going to, my question would be, are you allowed to then budget for that money, and if you don't spend it within the year, is it something that goes away, or can you accumulate that type of money for the finance?
So of course, the city's hope in the long term is hoping to start budgeting for this. Had they budgeted for these payouts, it would have been another 5% property tax on top of last year. So that it is a large property tax percentage, which is where the challenge comes in trying to figure out how to budget it. The idea is hopefully over the next 3, 5, 7 years, to kind of phase it in a little bit each year. And that the city's definitely looking at that. As far as, once they do budget it, yes, let's say in 1 year we budget $1.5 million in payouts and only pay out 1.2. In theory, that $300,000 then goes into fund balance and could be there to be appropriated for years, so that we budget 1.5 and 1.8. Right. So yeah, yes, long term, yes, that is possible.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Yes. Yep. So Leary, thank you. Even address for the record.
Catherine O'Leary, Long Beach. Excuse me. I have to say, I think it's the height of hubris to be asking again for money for this type of payment. Though I realize it's contractual money and it needs to be paid, I have to remind you that you're still under audit for the last batch of payouts that weren't exactly done honestly, okay? You have appointed DiNapoli, the Democrat, to investigate, to do the auditing. That's ridiculous. And Madam Singas is holding off to indict people based on the outcome of DiNapoli's findings. It's all a bad cycle. Okay, I'm gonna read you something that the Long Island Railroad is doing, and I'd like to show you the difference in their audit and our audit. Okay. The Rail Act will require the MTA to conduct an independent, comprehensive forensic audit of its procurement and uncover any fraud, negligence, anti-competitive conduct, bid rigging, wasteful spending, or insufficient internal controls. They also go on to say, the audit will be unique because it will be conducted wholly independent of the MTA administration. We cannot allow an agency whose leadership has overlooked such waste and mismanagement to police itself. And I refer to the last set of payouts. The public deserves to know where all that money is going, every last penny. And that applies to Long Beach residents too. I feel that this whole investigation of the previous payouts is a whitewash. If you really wanted to get it done, you would have hired an independent forensic person, as Senator Kaminsky suggested. And another thing, if you wanted to get control over this, your opportunity was January 1. You could have come down and said to the exempt and non-exempt employees, it stops now. You either use it or lose it. That would have been the stop. And in the paper, it said you have a handle on it. Unless you did that, you have no handle on it. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as saying use it or lose it, there's various collective bargaining agreements in place, and the city can't unilaterally, as management, go over to a union and change the term and condition of employment. That has to be negotiated. And as far as the exempt personnel go, there's a personnel code in place which guarantees certain vacation time that can carry over on behalf of exempt personnel.
That needs to be changed. That needs to be changed. And I've been talking about this for over 7 months, okay? I'm exempt, I just started a new job. Day 1, they told me, or day 3, they told me use it or lose it. Sick time, vacation time, personal days. What's the problem?
Most of us experience the same thing in the private sector.
Right, so,
Yeah.
you know, it's not a big deal.
So anyone else on this side here to speak? Mr. Lester?
Roy Lester, Long Beach.
Thank you.
First of all, I don't like the characterization of past practice as something that can't be changed. Past practice that violates a contract can be challenged at any time. I'm not saying you're going to win, but as management, it's your job to challenge the past practice that violates a contract. And in this particular case, nobody's done it. People have just basically said, well, that's the way it is, even though the contract says something else. That's the way it is. You guys were aware of it. You changed the contract for the new people or put it in, so you were aware of it for the older people, but you never challenged it. And I'm not saying that you would have won. I'm just saying it should have been challenged. I have a question though. You say that this can be paid out over 3 years without an agreement from the recipients, and 5 years with an agreement from the recipients. Were the recipients approached, asked if they would take it over 5 years?
Typically, yeah, that's,
Were these particular ones approached to ask if they would take it over 5 years?
the ones referenced in the legislative memo.
Yes.
Gee, I don't know, Richard Packard might remember that better than I. They were. He said yes. I think they were as well. I believe they all.
Okay, because that's not my understanding, and I could be wrong, and he
I
probably knows better than I do, but my understanding is they were not approached. Now, if we can do this over 3 years, and it's a total of $525,000 between the three of them, John, I'm sorry, that's what it says here. For the three of them, it's $525,000.
Yes.
Yeah, so over 3 years, that would be $175,000 rather than the $400,000 we would bond.
No, that
That's
that
just this year.
525 is the first year.
The what?
That 525,000 is the first of 3 years.
So it's 1.5 million for the three of these? 1.5 million for the three of them? No, we're talking,
There's 4 names there, Mr. Lewis.
right, I'm sorry. 1.5 million, well, it's 525, spoke 4, over 3 years. So almost 1.6 million for 3 or 4 people. So a lot of money. Okay, and so this is divided by 3, but that doesn't come out right. I'm sorry, no, the 3, I'm sorry, the 339, I was thinking of the 339, doesn't come out that way.
Well, the 339 just represents the amount that we project to year end at this point versus what was already authorized. The 339 is not related to the.
Okay. Now, the last question is having to do with the money that we're short. Last year, when we were short, when we lowered the bond amount, we were told it was lowered because Mr. Cagney asked the city manager, acting city manager, was able to find the money. Do you remember that? He found money, so we didn't need the bond, the 2.1 million.
That's different than this one.
That wasn't payout money?
That was the previous year.
The previous year, a $2.1 million bond was voted down. We were able to find about $500,000 to make that from 2.1 to 1.6.
And we can't find any money this
Because
year.
it was a one-time, it was just happened to be an old authorization that hadn't yet.
It happened to be a what?
An old unused authorization that hasn't expired yet.
We didn't know it.
Well, we did, we just didn't need to use it, so maybe only borrow what you need.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Anyone else on this side? Ms. McGinnis? Good evening, name and address for the record.
Good evening, Karen McGinnis, Long Beach. First off, I just want to comment on the fact finding and explanations regarding payout calculations. On day one, an experienced professional city manager hired in January 2018 would have solved these problems by now, including a new timesheet system, an automated one. It would take about a year in terms of implementation, and you can save thousands of dollars on theft of time by employees or some employees. There should be a written manual for how to calculate time for the police department, and the controller's office should have more oversight on this entire function. It's an extreme risk to have a homegrown software system for calculating police department time. We are not the only police department in the country. I had some concerns about the legislative memo. In paragraph 3, it states that the city is now aware that the separation pay obligation of $2.1 million in the current fiscal year exceeds the authorized amount of $1.8 million. Separation payments do not need to be authorized per se. It's the borrowing to pay for it that needs to be authorized. We should be finding savings instead of borrowing to meet the shortfall. such as delaying non-essential hires until July 1st, refraining from giving exempt employees raises outside the traditional July 1st raise date, or allowing non-essential people to work double time on Easter Sunday. To continue in paragraph 3 of the legislative memo, it was in poor taste to single out 4 people who we are specifically barring for because it just ain't true. To begin, Mr. Pepe's figure was already included in the July 3rd, 2018 special meeting memo. Plus, in the July 3rd, 2018 payout list, an additional $200,000 was set aside for TBD police retirements. Thus, the police department's specific overage is actually $180,000, not the $525,000 in the legislative memo, which tries to pin it on the cops. Moving on, I tried to get a better understanding on how these payments are going to affect the current year budget. So I looked at the 2020 budget, which lists the already forecast column for the 2018-19 actuals. Guess what? The current year forecast for the general fund, as far as the public knows, says that we are only using $1.5 million in financing revenue in the general fund. How is it that a few weeks after the budget is submitted, we are all set to borrow a total of $2.1 million? Is it all in this year or the next? It doesn't make sense. The 2019-20 budget submission also declares that the general fund is somehow miraculously going to end up on budget for the current fiscal year. It's an application of the city council's fiduciary responsibility to borrow more money for separation payments until the controller's office audit results are announced and until these payments are externally audited and verified. In closing, separation payment bonding is being used by the city as a mechanism to cop out on making long-term tough budget decisions. At the same time, can you see that you're demoralizing city employees? Just like a parent who gets burned by giving their grown child more money time and time again and doesn't get paid back, I request you to borrow more. Make it work.
Thank you, Mr. I think we tried to do automated timesheets. Was that a couple years ago?
Yeah, with respect to timesheets, the city has on several occasions tried to implement new time systems, but, I have to just say, and this is partial commentary on my part, but I think it's very unfair to cast aspersions on the previous city manager or the current acting city manager for not implementing a new time system when, in fact, that is a subject of mandatory negotiation with the union. So, to the extent the speaker ever actually enters the public sector and experiences these things in reality, or in real time, I think you're going to find it's not as easy as you might think. These are things that have to be worked out and negotiated with the union, and that takes a significant amount of time, and it also can potentially cause a lot of disharmony among the ranks. So I don't think it's necessarily demoralizing the workforce to say that, hey, we're going to implement a new time system. And by the way, this is also one of the priorities that I've outlined for this year. It's one of the things I'd like to do with the unions is start to update some of our antiquated systems. But in reality, if you're not doing that, we have the unions, period, for legal purposes.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Delory?
Good evening, members of the City Council.
Good evening. Name and address, sir.
Michael Delory, Long Beach, New York. Like I think Mr. Lester said, last year the bond was voted down and yet there was money found. Are you saying you found it in unused resolution, which then wound up bonding for?
Right, so just, for example, when they were talking earlier, where initially the bonds back in July, had been requested at $2.5 million.
Okay, well, just
So
answer. I understand, but that was where the money was found.
in that type of thing, so we had authorized $2.5 million and only borrowed 2.2, there technically would be $300,000 left on that authorization.
Okay, and your statement tonight is that you've researched all possibilities and there is nothing left in an unused budget or unused resolution.
There was only one bond resolution for separation pay that had money left on it, and it was used last year.
And so there, your statement is that there is no unused resolution. One was, so we depleted all of that.
Yes.
Okay, and I know you're the consultant, you attend these type of hearings from time to time. We're in budget season now. How much have you devoted to this particular topic?
This particular hearing,
You're asking about the budget?
No, how much time have you dedicated to this particular bond authorization? In other words, let me just clarify. All payment costs were internally audited and verified. Okay. Would it be fair that we could add internally audited and verified by the city controller consultant? Have you audited and verified all these numbers? If the answer is no, I understand.
if the answer is yes and no, I have verified the mathematical accuracy of what was put together. As far as the underlying payroll records, no, I cannot.
Okay. Has the state controller who is auditing past practices and the report's supposed to be issued this summer, have they gone to the point where they could sign off on these particular amounts? I want to understand, your resolution says all payment costs were internally audited and verified. It would be nice if we could have a description of who those individuals were. Or otherwise, it's who's authorizing the payment. In other words, if you're borrowing, who's going to sign off on all this?
As far as the borrowing goes, that's a combination of the controller's office, city managers, and bond council. As far as the borrowing goes, as far as the internal payments, that is a function of payroll, comptroller, and city manager.
Okay, so you're, okay. I know my time is up. I'll get to the point. My suggestion was to defer until the report comes out from the state controller. That's number one.
Well, we can't do that.
Okay, so you will be broke, I guess, we'll default or something.
And these employees will sue us for black.
Well, suing is not a big deal, we get sued all the time. I mean, seriously, this is,
But we'll lose. 'Cause
this is chump change compared to what potential is out there. And I don't think,
Your time is up. Mr.
okay, the
Lloyd.
last question is I think all union people and the city and other people would like to negotiate in everybody's best interest, because we're all taxpayers, residents, your residents. So, and,
Not all.
okay, sorry. And this-
Thank you, Mr. Deloitte. Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? No? Okay, anything else from the council? Okay, seeing no hands, close the hearing.
On to the calendar, item number 1, bond ordinance authorizing financing for the cost of fiscal year 2018-2019, separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city upon separation from employment state. The estimated total cost thereof is $400,000, appropriating said amount therefore and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $400,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. A hearing has been held on this item already. Item number 2, resolution directing the city manager to generate quarterly reports and to provide backup documentation regarding separation payments.
Sure, I mean, this is just a very simple item. Yeah, that's been promulgated in the interest of transparency and accountability to provide the council with actual separation payment calculations as well as backup documentation. That's it.
Anything from the council? No. Anything from the public on item number 2? Ms. Hession?
I think it's item number 2. I got confused when I asked my extra 3 minutes, so here they are. I have some questions on here, so I'll just read it straight through. It's about 3 minutes long. I feel better about this $400,000 bond if I thought the council and our acting city manager were doing something to try to save money instead of just spend and bond. I once asked during an earlier fiscal crisis, where are you going to get the money? And who he said, we can always borrow. And that's what we've done. In the future, I'd like to see you act as if you are working for the taxpayer and do something about saving money. At the last meeting, I asked what you would do about collecting money owed to the Youth and Family Services by people who work for Long Beach. Have you done anything about that? When the math was done correctly, it was found that many separation payments were excessive or not deserved. Have you done anything to get this money returned? Next, we have known that the city is in trouble financially, and yet you continued hiring, mostly patronage jobs, some for 6 figures, and at least one hire had just accepted a $30,000 separation payment. If you get rid of just 4 of these employments, you'll have the $400,000. Will you now declare a moratorium on hiring and raises? Next, there have been more city cars given out to employees who take them home and use them as personal cars. Have you done anything to get back any of these cars, or at least have them parked here at night? Next, I believe the men filling potholes received overtime. The potholes have been there for years. They can wait another day, don't have to do it on Sunday, so that they can get regular pay. Have you attempted to cut back on overtime? Next, is this $400,000 bond a complete payment? Well, this was answered before. It's not a complete payment. These big salaries, pensions, and payouts are not sustainable. Have you considered getting a better negotiator who has the taxpayer in mind? The math on the last separation payments was wrong. It appears we have no one on staff with a math background like a full-time comptroller would have. How do you know the math on the last payments was done correctly? I know that this is not a regular meeting, so I'll wait till the beginning of next week's meeting to hear all the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashley. Is there anyone that would like to specifically speak on item number 2, which is going to be, I indulge Ms. Hession, but we're going to stick to item number 2. Mr. Gosler? Quarterly reports on payouts.
Jay Gus, Long Beach. Isn't the city manager presently under a duty to provide the city council with monthly financial reports? And has he been complying with that duty? Because I've been told that he is not, and that there's no city manager has. So what assurance do we have that the city manager will comply with this new duty as outlined in this resolution? I mean, if you've done your notes and your obligations to report to the council on a monthly basis, nothing to give us any confidence that you're going to do it on a quarterly basis. Is there any kind of enforcement mechanism? Is there any penalty that's to be assessed if this is not complied with by the city manager?
Not that I'm aware, except I suppose we could fire him.
Can I just speak to that?
Please do, Councilwoman.
The council met last week, obviously to have a conversation about some of the concerns that have been raised, not only by residents, but also by fellow council members here. And we decided to move forward with this resolution because we felt it was a necessary step so that we can show you as a public that we are committed to addressing these issues. And one of the major issues has been the lack of information that's been available not only to us, but to all of you. And so this was a first step for us to publicly say that we're moving forward. We felt that by making resolutions and presenting them to you, the public, this would give you the opportunity to see that we're taking this very, very seriously. So in terms of this resolution, that was the purpose. We needed to go public with this information, and if this does not happen, then this will be made public to all of you. Because again, this is saying that we're making a contract here, an agreement, that we're going to receive the information that's needed. And if we, for whatever reason, if we do not receive this information, then we have the right now to share that information out in the open. But we believe with good faith, because it was a conversation with all of us, including the acting city manager, that information will be forthcoming. So this is our attempt to work together and to do what we need to do to move the city forward.
But it's meaningless to react the
Thank you.
actions if the city manager isn't going to provide the information, and we have no reason to believe that he will.
But
Is there anyone
we're
else?
going to believe that it's going to happen.
Anyone else that would care to speak? Mr. Lester? Please keep it to the item.
I always do. Like I said in Long Beach.
This is going to be giving us theoretically quarterly reports. I do echo Mr. Gusler's trepidation on something like this, but a couple of things bother me. Number one is that police, basically, you're telling me they're still using software from 93?
So 93, 94, yes.
Yeah, that's almost, 27-year-old software. As you know, computers have advanced tremendously. I think it might do the city some good to modernize our software. I don't know anybody that uses 27-year-old programs.
Fortunately for us, we have the person who wrote the software actually using it. So we're in the best position possible. He stated that he created the system exactly.
Excuse me. Can I finish my?
Sure, when I'm done, you can finish
Yeah,
your point.
thank you.
He's sitting right behind you,
I know
and he
that.
stood up and said
I
that he created it.
understand.
I'm responding to you, and he created
Well,
the system.
on your time, please.
No.
I don't like you grandstanding when I'm asking questions. Okay. The other thing is, we're still talking about handwritten timesheets. If we're giving quarterly reports and we don't have a decent basis for it, I think it would do the city well to invest in some type of time mechanism that gives us a little bit more accurate. And I do not believe you're correct that you cannot change the time system. I've been involved in labor negotiations for a long time, and if there's a better way to make the time system, as long as it doesn't impact the person, you're allowed to make more accurate time systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Egan.
Nora Egan. Okay, so if you could just clarify me, just because maybe I'm a little bit confused. So the council moving forward are going to get receiving claims reports. This is what the second resolution is about?
On a quarterly basis.
Yeah, on a quarterly basis. And so the receiving claims reports are going to be eligible or available to them to review so that before they agree on paying out somebody, they'll be able to look at it in detail. And it'll show like if somebody has like sick pay or comp pay or et cetera.
That's my understanding, yes.
That's your understanding. And so then with regards to one of the exempt employees, he's on the list for tonight to get a payout. He's listed as getting comp time, so that's, an exempt is not eligible for comp time. So do you pull this one out, his out of the file?
Sometimes exempt employees were union employees before they were exempt, and that would cause that situation to occur.
Excuse me?
Sometimes an exempt employee was previously a union employee, and that could cause that situation.
Oh. Okay, and so why did that never come up in the discussion last year? We've been talking about these for a year, pretty much to the date around exempt.
Because he separated this year.
Separated.
In this fiscal year.
And so he joined, he became like a CSE like in a couple of months or?
Before he was an exempt employee, I don't know the exact year he became an exempt employee, probably 2012 is my guess. But he was a union employee before that and amassed compliment back during that time. Not that it's really related, I think it's pretty beyond the scope of this item, but that's an interesting question.
Also individual personnel matters, so I suggest we just move on. I don't think the council should be discussing individual personnel matters. Sorry, I was saying, I don't think it's good practice for the council to be discussing an individual's personnel matters in a public forum.
Okay. Point taken, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Egan. Anyone else care to speak on item number 2, quarterly reports for the council? Yeah, come on, sir. Name and address to the record.
Dave Garfinkel, West Norway, Long Beach. I guess following up on the discussion on this down with Mr. Lester. Yeah, actually that's really bad. I'm sure everybody here's an honorable person and everybody police force is honorable, but no, it's actually really bad practice to have the people write the software that keeps track of your time. That's just bad software practice. So let's just understand that. And then with regard to this point, again, yeah, it strikes me as and just, I haven't been here, like, forgive me for that. From speaking to people previous to this outside, there was a gathering that, from my understanding, is people have been asking for a lot of information, which hasn't been forthcoming. So this resolution seems a little bit like meaning to mollify people asking for information. Meanwhile, the real information we're seeking, we're really not getting. That's what I'm hearing. So this doesn't sound like a very good idea to me. It sounds a little bit like just giving something without getting something that we really need or something useful. Then, no, we give you this report, but it's supposed to figure out what's this based on. And so without having it based on some real thing or something, it's really useless. So I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Conlon. Anyone else care to speak about quarterly reports for the council? Ms. Blanchett? Please state your name and address for the record.
Allison Blanchett. I would know and acknowledge International Workers' Day.
I was going to do it at the end.
Oh, okay, great. It's your day. As far as quarterly reports go, open data, quarterly. I've been saying this for a long time. That's my comment. If this wasn't we have to embrace this kind of technology. Maybe you can write the software for it. You wouldn't need to be passing anyone to get.
Thank you, Ms. Blanchett. Anyone else? I think I saw another hand back there. Mr. DeLorean, come on up.
Mike Delory, Long Beach. This is just a suggestion. Resolution directing the, and insert acting city manager and corporation counsel and controller's office, just to include everybody in there, to provide backup documentation regarding separation payments and distribute it to all current city council members. It's just, once it's in writing, I think it's easy for people to see it a little bit more clearly, even though it's implied, but at least these people in the future will have an idea of what this resolution means, what it's intended for. And I just have one question on generating quarterly reports. Would my understanding be, is this only quarterly reports just for separation payments? Or is it quarterly reports in general?
This is specific to separation payments.
Okay. Council members, do you have any, are you getting quarterly reports that are non-separation payments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGinnis?
Karen McGinnis, Long Beach. With respect to this specific legislation, this report comes in a vacuum because it doesn't also provide a forecast as to the next quarter's potential payouts. Then it also doesn't include a cash flow forecast that ties with the separation payments, which would give you a heads up on when the next time you really going to need to buy. In addition, only one person knowing a software is called a risk in an organization, even if they wrote it. And then finally, I think this legislation is a testament to the inefficiency of this council. You should not have to legislate for someone to do their job. Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak on the quarterly reports for the council? Okay, seeing no hands. Call on.
We will now move on to the voting. We will introduce and move the adoption of item number 1, bond ordinance authorizing financing for the cost of fiscal year 2018-2019 separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city upon separation from employment, stating the estimated total cost thereof of $400,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $400,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. Who will introduce and move?
I will.
Who second? Who will second? Councilmember Bendo?
So, the reason you got a bit of a data dump tonight is the previous bond triggered, the audit going on by the comptroller now, and we know there's an investigation going into it. So this was to focus on the police officers, because there's a concern that we could potentially be voting on something that could be illegal if the comptroller comes back and says this practice is illegal. In reviewing for these police officers, found again, I found 2 of them are paid more than is allowed in accordance with the contract. But our corporation counsel is assuring us that because it's a past practice, that makes it legitimate. The problem we have is that there are people expecting their checks, and if this doesn't pass, they don't get them. So we're kind of backed into a corner here, but I guess what I would say at this point is the cat's out of the bag. I would suggest to the city manager, the acting city manager, he wrap his arms around this, because you're gonna be coming back to us in July looking for next year's separation payment bond. And it's not gonna be as easy, because now people recognize what's going on. So with that, because we do have to pay these people, they're expecting this money, they have to pay their bills too, I vote yes.
Councilmember Mendo?
I'm not thrilled with this process, and I believe we will, and going forward, address more safeguards being put in place as the whole process is being reviewed, and echoing what Councilman Bendo said, as the audits are being carried out and the investigations, will learn more as that information is given to us. But I also realize not passing the bond would be irresponsible. There are people that are owed money. They work for the city, they're entitled to the contractual payouts, and voting against this, I think, would put the city in jeopardy. So I vote yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Okay, so as a city, we cannot continue to approve and administer improper payments, overpayments. We cannot ignore the fact that some of the same individuals that were involved last year are still involved in this process. Why hasn't the state comptroller vetted each payment and given us a written opinion as to the proper calculations? Why has the DA turned a blind eye? Last year, Todd Kaminsky recommended to the council at a city council meeting that the city hire an outside auditor to review the separation payments and not wait for the state comptroller, which would take a long time. Once again, in this room, we were all told that the state comptroller was already contacted by our President Arama. To this day, I have never saw the books open to show me that we could not pay the monies that were needed last year. I was accused of political theater on social media. My name was attached to cutting back the senior citizens' hours and buses. And then Council Bendo and I came to City Hall. We were locked out of the conference room on the 5th floor when we tried to come together and have a conversation with our colleagues here. To make matters worse, I was called anti-union, but I'm a member of 2 unions. I also work with the PAC on campus and have been a strong supporter of our local unions in Long Beach. And then after the real drama and the theater, money magically appeared. The people of Long Beach do not need magic. They need financial stability. They need open and transparent communication. They also need access to financial information. And as a member of this council, I need it too. I'm pleased with the ACM, Robert Estisi's efforts to make our finances a top priority, which we worked on with the CMA during last meeting. We still have to make this a top priority. We need to fix this so that we can turn the city around, but we cannot fix it tonight, and we cannot restore it tonight. I ask that my fellow council members pass a moratorium tonight to put an end to all of the separation payments and bonds until these issues are resolved. Based on the information that I received tonight as it relates to this bond, we have to respect and agree with the collective bargaining agreements, and we must honor them. However, we also know that I'm asking this particular audience and those who are watching live streaming to please call the DA's office, call the state controller until we have these reports so that we can validate our past actions. However, because the city must continue to function, we must continue at this time, and therefore, unfortunately, I must vote yes.
Vice President Diamond?
Yes.
President Ramos?
I would just like to add that, we do want to get to a place, everyone wants to get to a place where we are slowly budgeting over the course of a few years, socking away some money so that we don't have to borrow for these earned leave obligations. And that's the place we need to get to. And I'm hopeful that we can get there. I hope yes.
Who will introduce and move the adoption of item number 2, resolution directing the city manager to generate quarterly reports and to provide backup documentation regarding separation payments?
I will.
Who will second?
I will.
Councilmember Bendo?
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice President Diamond? President Ramos?
Yes.
We will now close the meeting. Who will make a motion to close the meeting?
I will.
Both items were adopted. We will now close the meeting. Who will make a motion to close the meeting?
I will.
Who will second?
I will.
Councilmember Bendo?
Yes.
Councilmember Mandel?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice President Diamond?
Yes.
President Ramos?
Yes. All right, thank you everyone for coming. Please stay safe and hope everyone had a happy International Labor Day. It is May Day. Solidarity forever.
Good.